Well, we'll now move to our next session. May I invite Ms. Bamzai to once again anchor another conversation. This one is on women's voices waiting to be heard. Could I invite our speakers, Ms. Shanta, Gokhale, Lady Kishwar, Desai, Ms. Minnie, Vaid, Ms. Samhita, Arni, and Ms. Deepanjana. A big round of applause for all of them. Ms. Shanta Gokhale, for nearly 5 decades, has chronicled and critical literary and theatrical tradition in India. A prolific writer, she has received the Sangeet Natak Akademi Award for her contribution to performing arts. Samhita, of course, she was there with us in a session before, wrote her first book at the age of 8, Mahabharat, A Child's View. Minnie Vaid, in her 3-decade stint in mainstream media, she has worked on socio-political, human rights, environment, and gender issues. Besides, she has authored 4 non-fiction books, including Those Magnificent Women and the Flying Machines, ISRO's Mission to Mars, that released this year. Kishwar Desai, again, she was there with us earlier, Indian author, columnist, chair of the Arts and Cultural Heritage Trust, and we also have Deepanjana. She was also there with us in the previous session, author of the novel Hush, a Bye Baby, and a biography of Raja Ravi Verma titled The Painter. I'll request Ms. Bamzai to take this session forward from here. Thank you.
And I assure you it will be the best conversation as well because, well, women rock. But thank you all for being here, and I can only start with Shantaji because... First of all, she immediately got Shantaji. I don't think she's been called that for a million years. Okay. I think that's much nicer. So I'll call you that. And, you know, your autobiography is just so amazingly humorous, frank, and, I mean, such a huge body of work because of the body metaphor, but yet you don't take yourself seriously. And if you were a man, you would be so full of it. So how do you keep your sense of humor and how do you not take yourself seriously? I have to tell you guys, because she's a playwright, she's a novelist, she's a translator, she's an art critic. She was PR for Glaxo for 10 years. She's been with Femina. She's been, I don't know, I've run out of all the things. Yes, also a teacher. In fact, she taught Minnie, and she's a mentor to so many brilliant journalists and writers. So how come you don't take yourself seriously?
All this sounds very amusing. No, basically, I think it's because I grew up very diffident, extremely diffident. And
diffident?
Yes.
God.
Yeah,
I can't imagine.
No. I kind of tried to shrink into the wall, into the curtains, not being seen, all that sort of thing. And it was only when I was sort of thrown into the deep when my father sent me to England, and we had to hunt for a flat. That's when some of my shyness dropped, because I had to call up people and ask them if the flat was still vacant, and then go and then have them look at you and say, "Oh dear, you're Indian. Sorry, the flat was just taken." So all of that kind of toughened me up. But till recently, even now, I am not too comfortable speaking, publicly. So, yeah, that's one thing. I'm a very private person, and I find the world very amusing, including myself.
I'm glad. We need a lot more humor, and I'm glad that women are finally providing it or being allowed to provide it. And I love the way you described yourself, dark but smart. You want to give me a little of the background to that? You talk about the categories of women.
Oh, I'm sure the whole of India, every single village and town has its own categories for fair to dark.
Yeah.
And Marathis do.
Right.
Yeah, very much so. And this business of Gahuvarna, which is a kind of very polite way of saying dark.
Which is wheatish.
Wheatish.
Yeah.
And whenever I hear that word, I kind of ask people, is it Khandwa Gahu or Pisi Gahu?
Now, what does that mean?
Now, they also don't know.
Okay.
So I'm one upon them there.
So,
but it's a class system. It is a class system. In the marriage market, that's where you discover which class you belong to. Yeah.
You've done quite well in the marriage market. You've done it twice.
I've done it twice. Yes.
And you talk about blissful singlehood. It sounds really blissful.
It is.
I love the way she describes it. You know, the bed is for yourself. Everything is for yourself. You can stretch yourself whichever way you want. But it couldn't have been very easy. But you seem to have made it, made that.
Yes, it's introspection at the time and a retrospection afterwards. Because when you introspect at the time and you sort out, now, I think I was wrong here, I think he was wrong there, and then he was wronger than me, and you come to terms. You don't carry that baggage forward. I don't. And when you look back, because of the distance, again, it's an amusing world. I mean, what is all this? This man is after you. And he says, oh, I love you and I can't live without you. And then when he starts living with me, then somehow, where is the love?
I think a lot of people will relate to that. Deepanjana, I want to come to you because I absolutely adore your two women characters. They're the two stars of Hushabai Baby. Tell me a little about them, but I'll just set the stage a bit. One is Reshma Gabuji, who I think is Deepanjana's twin. She's
in a world,
like her,
I'm as smart as she is.
Smart and also very cute. And there's Nandita Rai, who's this monster, a little bit of a monster, right? So you want to talk about how beautifully you construct the world of women who are not necessarily perfect.
I don't think either of them is perfect. I mean, even though Reshma is she's a positive character in the sense of categorization because she's not committing a crime. Those are our standards now. But so she is a relatively not bad character as far as we see her. But that doesn't mean she's great or that she's perfect by a long shot. She's got her own angularities. Certainly some of the ways that she gets to her information is dubious. But I think what I wanted the reader to respond to is that sense of being unsure and yet determined. Because I think that's what a lot of women I know have felt when they have joined workforces.
Yeah.
Because the expectations from you are bizarre. On one hand, it's so low, like that you can read is enough. But on the other hand, please crack gravity and relativity at the same time tomorrow. Like, it's this bizarre combination.
Let us not talk about gravity and relativity. Slightly sensitive subject.
Oops.
Do you know
the
scientists associated with the two terms?
Yes. No. Why
Well
done. No. I'm just going to point to the cows on my sari at this point. Anyway, that's not the point. So I wanted her to have that combination. Nandita Rai, on the other hand, is somebody who is she's like 15, 20 years into her practice. She's extremely well established. So I wanted her to be the exact opposite in that sense of Reshma, because she's at the other end of a spectrum in some sense. But I also wanted her to not be an out-and-out villain, because those are the most boring characters, because they don't make you think. And for me, the whole point of Hushabai Baby was that you should be repulsed by what is happening, but you're not to the point where you shut down. You must think about it, because it is a fact that female feticide exists in this country. It is equally a fact that we have not done very well in terms of improving the lot of women
in this country. There are obviously, there will be data and statistics to show that on certain measures we have improved. We should not pat ourselves on the back because those improvements are too few and far between. We should have done much better. We should have done much better across the spectrum. So when Nandita stands up and asks essentially, so she doesn't say much for the bulk of the book, and my book is not a whodunit, you know whodunit, very soon. 30 pages on, you know who's done it. 200 pages later, however, she has a moment which took me a while to write because I wanted her to leave the reader with questions. I wanted the reader to think about, whether it's a man reading or a woman reading, I wanted them to think about what kind of freedoms they are both privileged to themselves and also what they let other people have. So yeah, that was the kind of contrast that I wanted the two women to give to the book.
Shantaji, I want to briefly come to you and then go to because something she said sparked this thought in me. You write about your discovery of Dalit poets and Dalit writers and Dalit women writers, and you talk about how astonishing it was for you that there was this whole other world that existed. Talk a little about that discovery and how it changed the way you wrote and looked at society as well.
Well, actually, because my father was a journalist and he had this huge circle of literary friends, so Dalit writing and the Dalit voice as such had been with us as we grew up. The writing came like an explosion. And when you meet people socially, they come, they're having tea, they're different. When they talk about their lives, suddenly your eyes open and you think, oh my God, Uncle so-and-so went through this kind of life. And suddenly you're putting together the world that they have inherited and the world that they were born into. And it makes your flesh creep. But because my father was a leftist and so am I, the natural instinct really is to try and hear marginal voices right from the start, which is why for writing this autobiography, I kept saying, why me? I've grown up privileged. I'm so privileged. What do I say? Why should I say anything? The space is theirs to say. They have to say. We have to listen. So this was certainly how I felt from quite a young age, I must say.
You're the engaged observer. That's why we need to listen to you. Kishwar, I need to come to you now. And some of the themes that Deepanjana has talked about are also part of your work. And, Simran Singh's kick-ass investigator is very much involved in all this. But I also want you to talk about your new work, Devika Rani, which I'm fascinated by. It's a play. I don't know if you know, she's just written it. Yeah, so have I.
Thank you.
So I want you to talk about that and then a little about Nargis Darlingji as well, because somehow it seems to me that they're sort of bookends, of the same idea.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think there is a lot, which is why I really appreciate the fact that you have written your autobiography, however diffident you might be about it, because I do believe that more and more women, need to write and need to articulate their lives. I cannot tell you, Kaveree, how difficult it has been to piece the lives of these two women that you just spoke about, both very public women, both very well-known actresses, but their internal life, the lives that they actually led, there was always a mystery both behind Nargis's life as well as that of Devika Rani. And for both, I have to say that I have been fortunate enough to access letters and diaries and their private thoughts, which is why it gives me an immense kind of pleasure to have been able to actually mine that information, because it has been lying there, of course, for a long time, but probably not ever accessed before, because there is a problem there. Most women do a great job of covering up their real lives. And in both the narratives, which I have found, both with Devika as well as with... And Devika, it was even more shocking for me to find out that she actually had an abusive husband. I mean, this was not something that I would have ever dreamt, because I thought this was a while. You see it in the play. It's all out in the open now. So I can talk about Himanshu Rai, yes. He did... Well, we don't know how often, but he did beat her.
But
so, you know, this was... Well, you have to see the play. I'm not going to... And then you have to read my book.
Really
yeah. So, you know, what I'm saying is that these are secrets we always carry. I'm not saying we as in the ladies on this, but I'm talking generally about women, a lot of middle-class women, a lot of very celebrated women, what pain and agony they go through. And I think it's very important for them to articulate it. For example, what came to me as a shock when I was doing Nargis's biography was the fact that she used to cut herself. She used to self-harm. And when I read that for the first time, I mean, I was so appalled, because this is a young, beautiful actress, and she's doing extremely well, but she's under a lot of oppression and suppression from her own family. And the only way that she can express, of course, she falls in love with what one would call an unsuitable boy today. He's married, Raj Kapoor, and therefore there is a lot of angst in the family, and thus she is driven to do this in the privacy of her own room. So when you write an autobiography, and I'm sure we could come across maybe not this kind of narrative, but maybe another kind of internal narrative in your book. This is extremely helpful to build up the whole work of women's internal struggles and external struggles. So for Devika, I have to say it was also fascinating for me to see that she, I mean, again, some of this is in the play, some of it will come out in the book, is also to see that how open she was about a lot of things. I mean, she ran away with Najmul Hassan very openly. I mean, she did not hide it.
And then Ashok Kumar went to get her.
Not Ashok Kumar. Okay. It was, see the play. Some of the play, of course, I had to distill, because, you know, it is... the thing is that when you write a play, I have to also explain that a little bit. When you write a play, you really have to distill the lives into so many scenes.
Right.
You know, you cannot actually give, like you can in a book, which in my book will say, and then this happened, and then this happened. You can go in a kind of a chronological fashion. The play has to literally, in one particular scene, it may not, all those characters may not have been present at that time, but because you're limited by the space, you're limited by the number of characters, and Lilette was very clear. This play, by the way, is called Devika Rani, Goddess of the Silver Screen. It's running, today is another show in Bombay, and I'm very pleased to tell you that yesterday Wahida Rahman, Helen, and Asha Parekh all went to see the play together, and apparently they liked it a great deal in Bombay. So that's,
so you
know,
have
so
we
have to get it here. You know, that would be really nice. So what I'm saying is, because it talks about a narrative in a particular space, so therefore in the play it cannot run as chronologically. Right. You know, as I would have liked it to be. But Lilette, as I said, was very clear. She said, not more than 7 actors, darling. So everything has to be reduced, or rather compressed into those. So it tells her life, and of course it tells her life through dialogue, and it has to therefore move and through action. So there is a challenge when you write a play, which is sometimes not, you know, apparent to the audience, but there is. But I'm very pleased that I could do this, you know, because they are both very strong women. They both were iconic, you know, really iconic actresses. And as you know, they both got the Padma Shri. Yeah. And Devika Rani, despite everything that she may have done, running away with her lover, doing this, she got the Dada Saheb Phalke Award. And because, why? At the age of 32, I mean, we have to remember this. At the age of 32, she was already running a studio. By the age of 36, she had quit cinema and moved on. But, these are wonderful, very dynamic and very talented women.
In Samhita's case, we have to go even further back. And, all the wonderful women of the epics whom you've given a voice to. I'm not just talking about Sita, but also Kaikeyi, for instance. You're showing women as they are. They may be villainesses to the world, but, you show their rationale. So how have you sort of understood that process, and how have you done that?
Thank you. That's a great question. I don't think, when I look at humans and I look at all spectrums of human nature that I come across, I've never encountered absolute evil or absolute good. Everyone is flawed, or even the very dark person you meet has some one redeeming characteristics. So I think also when we project our ideas of absolute good and evil onto character, whether it's heroes or myths or whatever, this is rarely true in real life. And we actually hold ourselves to these examples and these expectations.
Especially women, don't you think?
Yeah, we internalize these rules, right? We all want to behave. For so many generations, we wanted to be like Sita, which I'm not always sure is the best example to follow in your own practical life. So I think I look there. I mean, I think you also channel your own dark side and you try to put yourself in Kaikeyi's shoes and try to say, what would I do if I was in this situation? And to realize that we all have those aspects within us. I think that's also the great thing about being a writer, is to channel all those different aspects within us.
And with Kannagi in The Prince also, talk a little about that, because again, it's quite fascinating.
Oh, so I got fascinated with the Shilapatikaram and the culture that produced it, the Tamil Sangam Era. Just
explain it a bit for the audience as well. They may not be so familiar with it.
So the Sangam Era lasts from about the 3rd century BC to the 2nd century AD. And it's called a Sangam because it's these great gatherings of poets who are producing these wonderful poems in Tamil. And this is really significant. This is a kind of a cultural renaissance for South India at that moment. And the great epic, the first epic that's produced, is the Shilapatikaram. And unlike so many other epics, you have the Mahabharata, you have the Ramayana, you have the Iliad, you have the Odyssey, whether you look east or west, so many of these are men's stories. They're stories about kings, they're stories about heroes, they're stories about Ram going and defeating Lanka, or they're stories about Odysseus going on this complicated journey. But in the Shilapatikaram, it's the woman's journey. It's the woman's story. It's Kannagi who is transformed by rage to destroy. There's a great injustice that's done to her. Her husband is unjustly executed. And Kannagi, ordinary woman, is filled with rage and sort of becomes a goddess and questions the king and rips off her breast and destroys the city of Madurai in the process. So I also think that this is really interesting in our times when, whether it's Nirbhaya or more recently the Me Too movement, we really have to channel women's rage, anger, into positive social transformation. So that's what I go back and I kind of I found Kannagi fascinating in that respect. But also, I don't know, I was brought up in a culture where women weren't angry. Men were allowed to be angry, but they weren't allowed to be sad. It wasn't okay for men to cry. Whereas women were allowed to cry, but they weren't allowed to express their anger. So women cried when they were angry, and men got angry when they were actually quite sad. I have experienced this with many boyfriends, so I know. So I think, but also to realize that rage, to finally let go and to actually experience your rage and experience what it's telling you, which is the need for change sometimes. That I found like an empowering insight that the Shilapatikaram gave me.
Right. And Minnie, we'll come to you because, we know about the wonderful ISRO women you've written about, but it's the Kudankulam women who actually embody what Samhita is talking about, that rage and what it can do. So tell us about that.
That's a real contrast. The Kudankulam women, nobody had even heard of them. Right. And people still don't because the struggle is kind of petered out. But a bunch of them used to sit every day on dharna just outside their church for more than 5 years, protesting against the fact that there's a nuclear plant in their backyard. And the first thing, the only thing they would tell journalists is, why don't people come and ask us what we want? And for everyone who says that the plant is safe, just come and live here, no? Why don't you build a house here in Lindakarai, and then we'll see. So, and when I asked them that you're fighting the might of the state, yeah, and you're just a bunch of women, they are not lettered, they're just very feisty and very knowledgeable women. They know exactly what harm nuclear radiation can do. So I asked them, I said, you're fighting against the state, and what makes you think, what keeps you going? Because, the writing on the wall was quite clear even when I had gone and interviewed them. So they said, well, A, we have to do this for our future generations, and B, and we are like the ant. So, an ant in the ear of an elephant can make the elephant mad. So I like that phrase so much, I put it as the title of the book. It's the title of the book. So, they were just amazing women. And then I called them for the book launch. Nandita Das had launched the book. Two of them from within the Karai, the main spokespeople. They got a standing ovation in the city of Mumbai. Because of course, we had a translator, and they spoke so well, and people are talking about their lives, and these are voices which have been totally marginalized. Nobody's even heard. So, in that sense, giving voice to the voiceless, really, it's the title of one of my films, is exactly apt for the Kudankulam women. And as far as the ISRO women are concerned, okay, they're not voiceless, certainly not, but for a large part of their careers, nobody knew who they were.
Exactly,
you didn't know
until
ISRO.
That famous picture, and then suddenly everyone discovered them. But that's also somewhat of a herd mentality.
Of course.
And then, of course, Akshay Kumar will make
yes.
where he'll be the hero.
Yes, totally.
And the women will be.
Yeah. And by the way, anyone who's seen Mission Mangal, that's not how the Mars mission was done. I mean, it's not. It's never 6 people and an Akshay Kumar in a dilapidated room in 2 months. Sorry, yeah, it's not. It's 18 months of hard work.
Very worrying.
Yeah, 18 months of hard work and 500 scientists, of which a fair share, almost 40% this time, were women. But see, ISRO today is a really indigenous success story. Yeah, everybody wants to know.
Yeah.
But when I started researching the book, and that was, it was a corporate event I was invited to, and there were these three Mars women, out of which Ritu Karithal was one. She's now the mission director for Chandrayaan 2. So they spoke, and I just went randomly because I was intrigued. I had the same picture I had in mind about those women celebrating in Kanjivaram saris. So they held the audience spellbound, all those 3 women. And Ritu, in fact, said something like, so we worked on the mission during the day, and we worked on it in the night, and we also, we took care of our families and our children, and we sent a rocket to space. It was so matter of fact, and they were so, this was work. I mean, so at the end of the day, however much you say, okay, they are expert at juggling their, family and work, at the end of the day, it is the work that counts. And they do excellent work in really, tight budgets, tight timelines, and they deliver. And that's really, what was remarkable. And so I was able to get inside ISRO, meet them. Getting permission from ISRO is probably harder than, writing the book and getting it published. But yeah, once you get that, I was lucky enough to meet 21, not just the initial 5 or 6. There was a kind director at one of the centers, and he said, there are lots of other women doing equally good work. So it's not only the Mars mission. So I went and met them, and then it was a really fascinating glimpse into their lives. Absolutely fantastic.
Shanta, I want to just take you back because I want to dwell a little more on this idea of anger. And I want to take you back to Crowfall, and you talk about this black time and all the crows dropping. And in a way, it symbolizes some of what we see around us. And you've also talked about living in a republic of fear and not being sure about what you're saying where. And a lot of the people who have spoken out are also women, very feisty, strong women. What do you think of the world that we're living in now? That Crowfall is the best metaphor I can think of. But
yeah, when I wrote that book, I had seen what was coming, and
you wrote it in
it scared me.
2008.
Yeah, it was published then.
Right.
I wrote it in 2006, and already things had started rolling in a direction which I thought was scary, truly scary. Because once you decide to use power in a certain way, and I could see it was going to be, then actually it's like in psychology, there's the phrase destructive obedience, which means that when a figure who is powerful and in authority is asking you to do something, he has a legal standing which you can't question, and it's his orders, so you see yourself as subservient to that person, and therefore you are obliged to follow those orders. And you look around and you see a whole lot of people are also following those orders. And that means that your responsibility, your individual responsibility to yourself is distributed, and then you become a herd. Then you're a herd. You feel comfort, you feel good, you feel noble. And when that happens, coming back is an extremely difficult thing. So when I wrote Crowfall, and somehow as I was writing it, black became a metaphor. It became, and just before that, I had heard of a politician's son gunning down not crows but pigeons, which was worse. And just the thought that there's this young man who's been given a weapon by a very indulgent father, and he has shot down some 50-odd pigeons, and nobody is shocked. It becomes a news item. So I just saw that sort of thing developing where the state could, with impunity, hurt, harm, kill. And all of us would say, it's for the country. Scary.
And so prescient. Deepanjana, I want to bring you into it, not just because you're wearing the cow sari, but also because you're a newspaper woman, and you do the front page of the Hindustan Times every night in Mumbai. Does the news depress you? How do you survive?
I think it's a question that anybody who looks at the news today has to think about. And there are very few things that I think give hope when you're looking at what passes for current affairs now. But I think one thing that is hopeful is the amount of interest that there is in it. We keep talking about how, readership numbers might be going down, some might be going up, but then the bottom line is there's an incredible amount of interest in what is happening, in what is not being told, what is not making it through certain kind of shouty bits of narrative. And that interest, I think, is incredibly hopeful. As journalists and media persons, I think we all have certain challenges that we face and certain negotiations, and just trying to keep up with the number of media that's out there, and it's like there's got to be a different news for Twitter and a different news for Instagram and a different news for Facebook and a different news somewhere else. Like, it's dazzling in many ways. But the point is that on every one of those media, there are people who are interested. And that offers an incredible opportunity in terms of what you're going to be able to do. Because we are moving potentially towards a readership and an audience that is more engaged, that is not as apathetic as perhaps what has led to us being in this situation. Perhaps. The only thing is that we better have the imaginations that can back this kind of, conversation. Because at the end of the day, the imagination is the most important thing. The imagination is what will enable you to look at a narrative and be able to pass through what is being said, what is left unsaid, what could have been said, what its antecedents are, what it could lead towards. This is all that we can do. This is all that we can hope to do with our reportage today.
Samhita, I want to bring you in and talk about the women of your imagination. You know, when you dream at night, who are the women who come to you? Because they're so wonderful, you know, and all their flaws and humanity and, you know, brilliance. Who are the women who you're haunted by in your dreams?
My grandmother. In a wonderful way. She was.
But why is that?
She was a woman who really lived life in the constraints of her time and her generation, and having to get married and have children and not really being able to have a career. She was still someone who had super short hair, wore red lipstick, sleeveless blouses, and up to the age of 75 went out to parties every night. And
wow.
When I grow up, I want to be her. And she lived this marvelous life, even within great constraints. And I think from her, I learned the possibility of having a rich inner life, even if your outside circumstances are very curtailed. And also being able to acknowledge your flaws or your vices and also to delight in them a little bit. And to see them, see folly as that.
Kishwar, you've done so many things in such a short span. There's a partition museum.
I'm pretty old, you know.
Oh, no, none of us is old. But you've done so much. How much of that is sort of powered by this need to tell untold stories?
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Especially of women.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there has always been a bit of what she said, absolutely correctly. There is that big silence, and partition also I was drawn to, because
especially
there was
from the women.
Women, yes, we have a whole section actually in the museum which is dedicated to women who went through it. So I think anywhere where, as we are Indians, are very good at forgetting our own history and even recent history, not preserving it. And as we discussed earlier, women have been particularly burdened by this because we have been made for many decades, not anymore, I think, but for many decades, made to feel as though our stories were unimportant. So therefore, my last book, for example, which I wrote on Jallianwala Bagh, was actually dedicated to my grandmother because she lived just a few streets away. Right. And she must have heard all the screams and the bullets, and she must have gone through that trauma as a child, and then she went through it again during partition. Right. So to go through two terrible traumas, uproot yourself, leave everything behind, come away. And so, the problem is that these narratives, unless we tell them, so the point is that if we are going to grow anywhere as a nation, we have to acknowledge the power and strength of women and take their narratives along with us, give them more public space. And I think if as women we don't do it, I don't think the men are actually going to sit and write about us. And if they do, then they will probably make us into these dumb bimbos, which they have portrayed us long enough in the long and lovely books which they have been writing. So I think, and even in cinema, which is why I chose a subject like Devika Rani, which I hope, as they're trying to now make into a film. I mean, she's a very stroppy, very feisty woman, a working woman her entire life. Yeah. As she starts working at the age of 18 and does not stop.
Young, right?
Yes, and even with her second husband, with Svetoslav, she remains a businesswoman, but she keeps her, self in the background. What I'm trying to say is that these narratives are all around us, on stage, off stage, everywhere. It's very important to acknowledge them and to take away the silence. It's extremely important.
Shanta, you, however, your father was actually, I think, the first feminist in your life. He was the one who pushed you to go to England to study. And in a way, a lot of the men in your life were also the ones who told you, stop being a cow and come back and do some work. And, and you tell it so beautifully. So men can be good. Men can be educated into being feminists as well.
Yeah. We had a discussion on Crowfall, and Giv Patel was in the audience. Right. And he said, there are no nice men in your book. So I said, they're all outside there. So, of course, there are some wonderful men, but in my life at least, I find that their ego goes against them. They could be even more wonderful, but such strong egos, and it's
at least the women can applaud it, if not the men. A little louder, come on. Thank you.
It's really...
This is not an anti-male sentiment, it's just a fact.
With my first husband, who had a terrible time because he was a Navy man. Fine, that was professional. I was doing my MA, and that was bad. So there was constantly this tussle, this, oh, you're doing your MA, of course, and, that sort of thing. So
you talk about his predilection for rum and rummy. I find it so cute. Sorry to intervene.
He was a cute man. But I got a bunch of my friends who are doing MA with me, and I said, I want you to come home and listen to this man talking to us MA students about a book that we have as a text. Just listen to him. So these people came, and all this was ego-building exercise. I have done so much ego-building in my life.
I think, yes, we all
You're
have.
an expert.
Minnie, we'll close with you, and really some of the things that Shanta has taught you as a mentor, as a teacher, and some of the things that you want to sort of tell the young women out here.
Just to continue what people were saying, there's a very interesting part in an interview that I did for one of the ISRO scientists. Now, these are women who actually do rocket science, and still,
which is not a cliche in their case.
Not an easy thing. So she said very proudly, I don't think she even realized, and she was one of the senior most scientists, I don't think she even realized what she was saying. She said, there's no gender disparity in ISRO, not at all. You see, like my boss, one of my bosses, he told me, I won't take her name, I have never treated you like a woman. So she says, sir, I have never behaved like a woman. You asked me to go at 6 o'clock to Ahmedabad. I left at 6 o'clock to Ahmedabad. She wasn't even aware that it was, something. Yeah, my eyes almost popped out, but hers didn't. And even for the other women, like they all said, my husband's very supportive, and of course I should thank my family and they allow me to come back late. They're okay with my working late, and that's rocket science you're doing. You're sending off a rocket to Mars. I mean, why shouldn't he allow you to come late? So these were, kind of, so you may say, challenges, and also, just shows you that, yes, these women are role models. They are visible icons for the next generation or younger women who want to do STEM. But they still have a long way to go. There's been no woman who's been an ISRO chairman, no woman who's been a center director. But the good part is, of course, that now with Chandrayaan-2, doesn't matter that the lander didn't land. 50% don't land the first time. The mission director is a woman.
Yes.
The project director is a woman. How many people in this audience would know that?
Right.
You still need to know. You still need to tell people, okay, these are the women, and, it's not easy doing rocket science, but they've done it.
Just both of you, last comments from you. Samhita, the whole idea of writing about women, do you sometimes get from your publishers, why are you writing only about women? Why can't you write about some of the male superheroes we've had in our epics as well?
Actually, weirdly enough, no one has asked me that. And I think
Thank
my
God.
publishers seem to feel like women do sell because we have economic power and we want to buy our own books and read these things in there. But I have to say, there are some wonderful men out there.
Yes.
And they're also very open to, suggestion and change and finding more and more of that. We have to educate them a little bit.
Education is key.
Yeah, but they're also very amenable to change, and there are also women who are extremely patriarchal also out there. So sometimes it's less about gender and more about how rigid your belief systems are.
Deepanjana?
No, nobody has. I think one of the reasons why no publisher has asked is because the Indian English publishing in particular is very women-dominated.
That is true.
So that's one. But yeah, like Samhita said, that I don't think it's necessarily about gender, But it is a fact that whenever we say that, whenever we have conversations about men and women and stereotypes of men and women, we fall over ourselves to clarify that not all men.
Yeah.
No one falls over themselves to clarify not all women.
Yes.
0 times. When it comes
Louder,
to women,
louder.
when it comes to women, we're totally okay assuming that she's lying about the rape allegation.
Yeah.
We're totally okay imagining that she has prioritized other things, the wrong things. We are ready to imagine that because she's wearing a questionable outfit, she must be of questionable morals and therefore incapable of doing things. So maybe we should just fix that first.
May you all write more. Thank you very much for your conversation, for your insights, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yes, it was really interesting to hear the women's voices here. A big round of applause for our panel. And could I request Mr. Chawla to please come on stage and felicitate our panelists. Just to once again inform, the valedictory ceremony is at 6 o'clock. Honorable CM Shri Naveen Patnaik would be joining us and for the first time would be taking questions from the audience. So if you have your questions, this would be probably your last chance. Do send it to 9438528844. The best questions will be selected by the team and the Honorable CM Shri Naveen Patnaik would be answering them.